Hi, little guy. Did you and your friends have fun?
This is not okay. This needs to stop now.
Alrighty, we should be live. Nathan Budnett, episode 29, guys. I don't know how long this episode is going to be, but we do got some stuff to talk about. Obviously, the NBA Finals wrapped up a couple days ago, so let's go ahead and just get into that right off the bat. But before that, I will say that these episodes are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts in the audio version if you don't like listening to them on YouTube. As well as be sure to follow the Twitch where these episodes are streamed live, and subscribe to YouTube. Trying to hit 500 subs by the end of the year, and we're at about 350 right now, so we're almost there. And let's just go ahead and get into it. So, first things first, the Warriors won the 2022 NBA championship. And now a lot of people are asking what this means. Obviously, a lot of people with Curry winning the Finals MVP are now saying that Curry is, the greatest of all time, top 5 all time, top 10 all time. And I gotta admit to you guys, let me mute my desktop audio real quick so you guys don't hear the USB noise. I gotta admit to you guys, I think that Curry is top 10. I don't put him in my top 5. I think he may be somewhere in the 7 to 9 range, but he isn't top 5 for me. And let me explain why. Curry is not the best point guard of all time. If he was the best point guard of all time, he would be top 5. But some of you may already know where I'm going with this. Magic Johnson, to me, is still the best point guard of all time. And Magic Johnson is in my top 5. Therefore, if Curry was better than Magic Johnson, he would be in the top 5, and he is not. And Google Chrome has been using a lot of memory for me lately, so we're probably going to see a bit of lag here on the stream. But let me pull it up real quick for you guys. Alright, so right off the bat, we can go into championships. I know championships isn't what makes a player better, but just right off the bat, Magic Johnson has more rings. Alright? But if we go through literally every other award or every other stat, Magic Johnson beats Curry at everything. Assists per game, rebounds per game, steals per game, blocks per game, total rebounds, total assists. As we can see, the only thing that Steph Curry beats Magic in is points and shot percentage. And that's why I will go to say that Steph Curry is one of the greatest shooters of all time, at least that I have seen. I mean, he revolutionized the game, and he made it a more offensive game, which I talk about basically every episode, and I'll actually get into later this episode again. But being a point guard is more than just shooting and scoring points, obviously. Being a point guard is the one that facilitates the play, gets the ball first, all that jazz. So playmaking ability, and obviously not all of that is box score, but a big percentage of that is the assists that show up in the box score. And Magic Johnson was just can't even be compared, indescribable in his ability to make passes, to play make, to get those assists. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube, plenty of highlights of just Magic Johnson's crazy assists and passes. And to me, Magic Johnson will still be the greatest point guard of all time. Winning Finals MVP in his rookie season, doing all these things that have never been done before and probably never will be done again. And that, to me, is why Magic Johnson is top 5. And therefore, if Curry is top 7, Magic is top 5. To me, Magic is still that best point guard, and Curry is not top 5 for me, but he is top 10. And he's also not the best point guard for me. And this goes into a lot of recency bias as well, which is what I wanted to bring up. So recency bias has a lot to do with this. You know, Curry just won the championship, and so everybody's going on to say that, Curry is one of the best of all time. You know, he's top 3, top 5, whatever, putting him crazy high up here. And then also the reverse being true as well, saying, Jayson Tatum is garbage, the Celtics are garbage, all that sort of stuff. It's like the Celtics made it to the finals, guys. You do realize that Jayson Tatum was keeping up with Giannis, scoring 40 a night in the playoffs. That's a huge feat. And it's just recency bias is crazy, the way we instantly, based on the most recent game or most recent achievement, either boost a person way up high or way down low. And that's what's happening with Curry right here. Again, I don't put him in my top 5, but some of you might. But that's because y'all just saw him win a championship. But a lot of people forget about some of those older players like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell. So for me, I just think recency bias is a huge issue, and that can also go into other teams that we've seen as well. A lot of teams have been injured this season, which is another thing that I have on my list to talk about, which is where some of these teams might end up as the next season. Because you got to remember that hopefully for the New Orleans Pelicans, they get Zion next season again. But they get Zion next season again. I've talked about Zion multiple times. I think that Zion can still be dominant, and he has a similar story with injuries and his diet as Joel Embiid does, which I did a video on, which I'll link. And then obviously the Clippers as well. The Clippers are getting should be getting Kawhi back. Kawhi hasn't played in a while, and so people have been counting the Clippers out because it's just been Paul George. But you got to remember that Paul George used to be one of a great dominant player whenever he's played in Indiana and whenever he played with the Clippers for earlier. And then also they made it to the playoffs last year and the play-in this year with no Kawhi. And so I think getting Kawhi back, the Clippers can go to at least maybe a second round next playoffs. And obviously the Bucks as well. The Bucks, people were talking about it at the beginning of the season. The Bucks were injured, and the Bucks were losing almost every game because we were injured. We didn't have Middleton, we didn't have Drew. Some games we didn't have Giannis, and all the other fans were saying, look at the Bucks. They didn't deserve last championship. They're washed, all that sort of stuff. And all the Bucks fans were saying, don't worry, we're still the best team when healthy, and y'all will see when playoff time comes. Well, the same thing happened in playoffs that happened at the beginning of the season, unfortunately. Middleton got injured, and we didn't have our full roster, didn't have our full ammunition that we have in our roster, and that caused us to lose a Game 7. But it goes back to the same conversation we were having at the start of the season. When the Bucks are fully healthy, I fully believe that they are still the best team in the league when healthy, over the Warriors that just won the championship. And you can hold me to that. But it just depends on if they are healthy, which they just happen to have not been. But the last one I actually have on here for expectations of teams may surprise y'all. But actually the Nets. The Nets ended up getting swept this playoffs and did not do very good. However, we don't know what's going to happen with Kyrie. Apparently Kyrie and the Nets are still debating their contract. So we could see Kyrie leave because, he's not guaranteed to stay there next season. However, KD is there until 2024 or 2025 if I remember. It's a 4-year contract, if I remember, for KD. However, Kyrie can leave if he wants to, and Harden obviously already left. But Ben Simmons is on the Nets. Now, again, this goes back to recency bias. Ben Simmons had the terrible playoff run with the 76ers, sat out for the 76ers, and then sat out for the Nets. However, again, he was defensive player. He was up there for defensive player of the year a while back. Ben Simmons' defense will add a lot to the Nets, and I've said this before, because the Nets are a team that sort of noticed the shifts that I've mentioned multiple times of moving the NBA to a further offensive game and less defensive game, and basically put all their eggs in that offensive basket. Let's get Harden, debated as one of the best shooting guards of all time, although I do like D-Wade more personally. Let's get Kyrie, pair him with KD. But they didn't really have any defense. They had some of the worst defensive ratings of any team because they had no defense. They were all offense. They wanted to outscore the other team as much as possible. And Ben Simmons adds a lot of defense to the Nets, which will help balance out their roster a little bit. And so while KD is putting up, 40 points, 30 points a night, like he can do, Ben Simmons can also have 2 or 3 blocks, or whatever the case may be, and that'll really help lock down a lot of their other formidable opponents, like Jayson Tatum with the Celtics, Giannis with the Bucks, Jimmy Butler with the Heat, and so on. And I think that Ben Simmons really will help the Nets go into at least the first round in the playoffs, and not get swept like they did this year. But we'll have to see what happens with Kyrie first. But back to the whole Warriors-Celtics thing. I've gotten a lot of comments on a recent video that I will leave in the description and link in the card up in this corner. It's hard to point with the camera mirrored. I go left and then on the camera goes right. But I've gotten a lot of comments recently because I made a video a while back about how Jayson Tatum wants to be like Kobe, and it hasn't necessarily worked out for him. And a lot of the comments have said, how I predicted it, how the video aged like wine, all that sort of stuff. Because, again, I was talking about how Jayson Tatum wanted to be like Kobe, and he isn't passing the ball and stuff like that. And the video's a bit older, so the mic quality and stuff like that isn't as great. My background music is probably cringe, but, I'll still link that video because I think it's good. But we saw exactly that in these playoffs, the whole meme floating around the NBA community of Jayson Tatum texting Kobe, wearing the Kobe bands. Excuse me. Got the hiccups right now. Not a great time to have them while recording, but having the Kobe band, having the Kobe text, etc. And then also I talked about in that video how he had trainings with Kobe saying, shoot it whenever you can and don't pass it if you don't have to. And then if we go once again, I will switch to Chrome here. If we go to per game stats, Jayson Tatum has the most 3-point attempts of anyone on his team. And I don't know why it's not letting me sort it by that. Usually you can click the top here and it'll sort it, but it's not working for whatever reason, so I'll just do it manually. So Jayson Tatum at 8.6. Next highest is Jaylen Brown at 7.0. And then after Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, it doesn't even begin to compare. 5. And then it gets into the 3s. And then after the 3s, they're all 0s after that. Jayson Tatum is taking the most 3-point attempts of his team by far. And then if we go to normal field goal attempts, again, Jayson Tatum being in the 20s, everybody else, Jaylen Brown getting 18, close to Jayson Tatum, Marcus Smart in the 10s, and then after that, not even in the 10s. the Celtics quote-unquote big three is like the only three players they have almost at this point. You know, that's why the Celtics have such a tough time right now, is because they are playing, they're playing offensively. They're shooting the three, obviously, which we've seen in the game. But the issue is that, so as you can see, look at this. Look at Jayson Tatum's field goal and 3 attempts compared to everybody else. It's just insane, the difference. You know, I talked about in that video, Jayson Tatum is playing hero ball, and he's playing, ball hog like Kobe, and he wants to be like Kobe. And he's holding the ball and taking much riskier shots. And we can see it in the box score. We can see it with the eye test. You know, it's not it's not making it up. I mean, it's there no matter what you look at. If you look at the stats, it's there. If you look at the eye test, it's there. If you look at post-game interviews, it's there. You know, whenever I posted that video, we talked about Marcus Smart saying, we can only do so much with the ball not in our hands. And, people thought that the problem would be resolved. And then we go to playoff post-game interviews, and I made an Instagram post about it as well. Marcus Smart, Derek White, even the coach was saying, whenever players don't have the ball, they sort of just stand there and let Tatum or let Smart, whoever has the ball, do whatever they want, and they don't really do anything off ball. And they just let that person do all of it. And that's the Celtics' biggest weakness right now, is not really playing as a cohesive unit. Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, and Jayson Tatum are sort of, they are the big three, but it's almost as if they're the only three playing. It's a 5v3, and you're going to lose a 5v3 almost every single time. And that's really the issue that the Celtics have right now, in my opinion. All right. Next up on here, I have the Spurs got a new sponsor. So the Spurs getting a new sponsor, I wanted to talk about because I think it's a lot more important than people are giving it credit for. So the Spurs have a new sponsor that is on their jerseys. It's called Self Credit Union, or something like that. It's called Self. I don't know if the credit union is part of their name or not, but it's basically helping you build credit and everything like that. Now this has multiple impacts, which again is why I want to talk about it. So we no longer have Frost on our jerseys. So Frost has done something we have done, which obviously isn't really released to the public because it's it's between businesses and different contracts and stuff like that. But either Frost didn't want to be connected with the Spurs anymore, or Frost didn't want to give us as much money as we needed, or something to where we lost them as our jersey sponsor. So Frost already has that diminished relationship with us. Then you have to also remember that we haven't really done much with HEB in a while either, which really disappoints me because I really like whenever the HEB and the Spurs do things together, whether it be their commercials, stuff at the games, whether they make those Spurs reusable bags that you use in the store, stuff like that. But Frost is also partnered with HEB, hence the reason why if you've ever been in an HEB, every ATM they use and every single HEB across Texas is a Frost ATM. And Frost and HEB have done multiple events and things like that together. Frost and HEB are also partnered, meaning that if the Spurs have a diminished relationship with Frost, they also have a diminished relationship with HEB, meaning that we could also lose some potential sponsor money or sponsored events with HEB as well. That's what's really concerning to me because, again, I love having HEB as a sponsor. I was hoping whenever they said we lost Frost that we would gain HEB back on our jerseys, but unfortunately that didn't happen. The other big thing is that self is based in Austin. So I know that Clan the Spurs fan made a video about it, and he was saying don't overreact and everything, and there is no need to overreact about the Spurs relocating. The Spurs love San Antonio, and San Antonio loves the Spurs. Originally, we didn't, and I left this comment on Clan's video, but I'll say it here on stream. Those of you that know your history or have lived in San Antonio, there used to be a time before the New Orleans Pelicans had their own team that the Spurs didn't have enough money to stay in San Antonio, and they were looking to move. And they came out and said, "Hey, we're looking to move. We're looking to go to a city where we earn more money." And they were looking to move to New Orleans. It would have been the New Orleans Pelicans or the New Orleans Spurs before the New Orleans Pelicans, got their own team and became the New Orleans Pelicans. However, San Antonio actually did a poll and did an official voting ballot that asked if the residents of the county where this stadium resides in, if they would pay a tax in order to keep the Spurs inside San Antonio, which passed, which means that we voted as a people saying that we love the Spurs enough to pay money out of our taxes for them to stay. And that money went to go build the AT&T Center when originally we had the Alamo Dome. And, I'm not sure if we still pay taxes to keep them in San Antonio, but either way, we paid a large amount of money to keep them in San Antonio because we want them in San Antonio. But there's been talks, there's been tweets, there's been everything about the Spurs playing more games in Austin to sort of get in that Austin revenue, generate an audience in Austin. We have the Austin G League Spurs over there. So it worries me. I won't say it worries me too much because, again, you don't want to get overreacted or anything like that. But I love having the Spurs in San Antonio. I'm from the 210. I love being in a town or in a city that has a basketball team and being able to say, I'm from San Antonio, therefore I am a Spurs fan. And so if they move to Austin, it would greatly disappoint me. But I just think it's worth noting that company is based in Austin, and then that also goes into the AT&T Center as well, which we just talked about. The AT&T Center is called the AT&T Center, obviously, because the AT&T pays a large amount of money for it. However, AT&T, which I've brought up before, did not renew their naming contract, which means that the name for the new stadium is sort of up in the air right now. We could either name it after another company if they decide to pay it enough, or it will just be Spurs Arena, San Antonio Center, something like that. But it really opens the door for, what happens if we don't have the AT&T Center anymore, if we don't have a sponsor paying for that arena anymore, and if we don't have anybody paying for the AT&T Center anymore, we'll have to do either A, what we did before, which is create some sort of vote in order to keep the money and keep the revenue there that AT&T was previously giving us, or move to another town like Austin where they might want to sponsor us in Austin, or we have more revenue ticket sales in Austin, and so on, because either way we have to make that money up somehow. So one of three things: either we get a new sponsor, we let the people in the city pay for it, or we move to a completely different city altogether. And that's why I wanted to bring up the sponsor, because again, it has a lot more butterfly effects than people give it credit for. And as a Spurs fan, it really concerned me. So another thing I wanted to bring up on here, I saw somebody on the comments on Instagram the other day. Let me take a sip of my coffee real quick. I saw somebody in the comments on Instagram the other day. There was a post by the NBA or somebody that pointed out that Duke could possibly have up to 5 first-round picks in this draft. And somebody replied saying, that's why Coach K isn't a good coach. Duke has talent year after year, and somehow he still loses to UNC. And I think, respectfully, that is the most idiotic take I've ever heard. Because coaching takes a lot of talent, especially whenever you have those good players coming to you every single year. We talked about, we had Swiss Eel on the podcast a while back talking about March Madness, and we went into Coach K, and we compared him to Pop a little bit. If it was the case that once you get talent, you're no longer a good coach, Popovich wouldn't be a good coach. Phil Jackson wouldn't be a good coach. Steve Kerr wouldn't be a good coach, and so on, which obviously is not the case. It takes talent to coach talent, because if all it took was just good players, then we could ask, why didn't the Lakers make it to the play-in this year? There you go. It really does take talent to coach talent, because you have to know the game, and more importantly, you have to instill discipline in the players and be able to basically tell them that you are the coach and you know the game, and they are going to run the plays that you say, and they have to listen to you and they have to respect you. And that, going back to the NBA, that isn't what happened with Frank Vogel. Frank Vogel just kind of let LeBron do everything, let the players run out there, sort of figure it out on their own, versus Popovich. Popovich, despite the Spurs losing the play-in, we still made it to the play-in with the players that we had, because we used our pieces accordingly with Coach Popovich. And Popovich, again, has 5 rings as a coach because him and Tim Duncan were both fundamental, and it just came down to putting our pieces where they needed to be. If all it took was talented players, then Coach K could have just sat on the bench the entire time, threw the players out there, and just let them win. But it takes discipline, it takes knowing the game to tell these players what to run, tell these players where they're going to go on the floor, what they're going to do, and that's what gets the wins. You have to be able to make rotations and know which of your players can be good at rotations, which player should go in for the other one, what you're missing on the floor right now, and so what you should sub in for. And that's obviously a major criticism of Coach Mike with the Bucks right now, messing up rotations right now, which I think is one of the biggest problems for the Bucks right now. But coaching also builds, that relationship. Tim Duncan and David Robinson both had Pop in their Hall of Fame speech. It's about being somebody that the players can look up to, and coaching builds a player. Again, the Spurs have one of the best developments in the league because we have Popovich and we have all of our athletic trainers and assistant coaches and stuff like that we're able to delegate what is a weakness, what is a strength, what can we work on. And it's a lot harder to point that out for somebody to do for themselves versus having a coach do exactly what their job title is, to coach and tell you, hey, these are the things we need to work on a little bit, and here's what you're lacking in, here's what we can work on, and that sort of thing. And Coach K, again, the players loved him. Pop and Coach K both, whenever Pop, whenever he got the win record, and Coach K, whenever he was retiring, surrounded by players hugging him and just celebrating him, jumping up and down with him, because again, he built that relationship with them, he helped them grow, he respected them, and then the players respected him, and so on. And so saying Coach K is a bad coach. Phil Jackson is a bad coach for having MJ or Kobe. Pop is a bad coach for having 3 Hall of Fame players. It's just so silly to me. I think honestly, Pop didn't have three Hall of Fame players. He made them Hall of Fame players. And Coach K, he didn't come in with players that were ready for the draft. Sure, they may have been built for the draft. They may have had the height, the weight, the vertical, but he still didn't have players that were ready for the draft. You couldn't have drafted them straight out of high school. They still had to play a year of college, learn the game, make them draftable by learning more about the rules and how competitive it is going to get as the levels continue to go up. And that's all I got for that. I mean, I'm not going to repeat myself and go on a crazy tangent more than I already have. But to me, coaching is an incredible part of the game, incredibly important part of the game. And to just downplay somebody for saying, oh, they had good players is so ironic to me. But the last thing I have for this episode, and I know it's a bit of a quick episode, is I have not looked at any mock drafts yet. I didn't want to look at any mock drafts until I recorded an episode because I wanted to do a live reaction to mock drafts and then hopefully get this episode out before the NBA draft, and then we'll do a live reaction to the NBA draft. And then after that, we will discuss the draft in depth on the next episode, which is going to be episode 30 of the Nathan But Net podcast. So let's go ahead and look up some NBA mock drafts, shall we? Excuse me again. I have some hiccups, which is a terrible time to have while recording. But I know the Spurs were looking to maybe trade up in the draft, but I don't know if it's going to happen because I've talked about with CJ Hoot Talks on the podcast before that the Spurs usually aren't the type of people to trade picks or anything like that. But they did say that they are looking to draft up. So this is CBS's 2022 NBA mock draft. So let's go ahead and read through it together, shall we? Let me get this squared up, lined up real quick. Alrighty. So they have a picture of, I'm pretty sure this is Jabari Smith right there. So he's probably going to be number 1. And I mean, he's in the title. Jabari Smith, number 1, ahead of Chet Holmgren. So let's go ahead and go through this. Orlando Magic getting Jabari Smith. I know that Jeremy, JX Remy, is happy about that because he didn't want to get Chet Holmgren. I think that Chet Holmgren can still be great. The problem is, again, he needs a good development. And so Chet Holmgren going to OKC, I don't know too much about the development staff over at OKC, so I can't really comment about it. But Chet Holmgren does need to be somewhere where they can put muscle on him and develop him. But I think he really can be a great player. And Jabari Smith, power forward, he's something that the Spurs really need, in my opinion. But obviously we don't have that pick. But being a power forward with a 42% from 3, and 16 points per game, 7.4 rebounds, really good. And it says right here, fits into the Magic's organizational emphasis on length and versatility. We can also put the ball in the basket. And yeah, I mean, that explains it perfectly. So let's go ahead and go to Chet Holmgren. I already pretty much talked about him. There's some scuttlebutt, blah, blah, blah. If he were 40 pounds heavier, Holmgren would be considered a can't-miss prospect in the ink of Anthony Davis, given his defensive impact, shooting IQ, and basketball IQ. 39% from 3, 9.9 rebounds, and 14.1. I really wish they would put more defensive stats right here because his blocks per game are really important. Chet Holmgren is a defensive player, and that is what I like to see, getting more defensive players in this draft. And I'm gonna do some. I'm gonna talk about it more in the next episode. But I think that this draft can bring back a lot of defense for the league, being that like almost all of the first round draft picks are going to be small forward, power forward, and centers. So they're going to sort of bring back big men, bring back defense, and so on. But again, I'll talk about that more in a future episode. So, and my Google Chrome just went black here, so hang on. All right. Paolo Banchero going to the Rockets. So the Rockets just made a crazy trade for Christian Wood, which I won't really talk about because I don't have much comment on it. But again, I've talked about this many times before. I think that Banchero sort of has a red flag with him about having sort of this ego, and I feel like he could easily go to a different team than what he was drafted on in the next couple years. So I wouldn't heavily rely on Banchero for any team that drafts him, because I think we could easily see him moving teams very quickly after he is drafted, because I think he sort of has a high status of himself, which is good in a way, because you want to go out on the floor thinking you're the best on the floor. But again, it goes back to the coaching. You want to be able to have the coach respect you and respect your coach and that sort of thing. And if you have too high of a status of yourself and you just go out there pretending that nobody can tell you how to play your game because you know how to do everything right, it just isn't going to work out. So, all right. Jaden Ivey going to Sacramento Kings. I don't know much about Jaden Ivey, but hopefully Sacramento doesn't screw up another draft, because it would be fun. I'm not going to lie, seeing Sacramento back in the playoffs or anything like that, just because the amount of excitement that would be formed around it, because they haven't been there in so long, and they haven't really been in the conversation at all for many years. Nobody's talked about the Kings ever since Kobe was playing. So I think it would actually be exciting if Sacramento picked up somebody really good and just balled out like crazy. So this is where the intrigue begins, since many teams are reportedly sending their best packages to Sacramento to see if they can move up to number 4. This is talking about the Spurs and other teams trying to trade up in the draft. The reason is Ivy could surpass the consensus top 3 in the draft with his speed, strength, explosiveness, and finishing ability. At the end of the day, the Kings' traumatic memory of passing on Luka, wow, you had to take that jab at him, should prevent them from overthinking this. Just take Ivy and worry about the fit with De'Aaron Fox and Davion Mitchell later. That I don't think is good advice. I think you should get somebody that fits with your players off the bat, rather than just being like, oh, let's pick this guy and worry about team chemistry later. Because I've talked about many times on this show the importance of team chemistry for me, because if the players don't blend together, it just isn't going to work. We saw that with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert this season. It just doesn't work if the players don't respect each other. So Benedict Mathurin, who the Pistons could take with this pick is a mystery, so I'll go with the highest player left on my board. And Mathurin, he's probably blown away teams in his workouts and in interviews, and to me, he has an all-star upside, giving his shooting ability, defense versatility, and motor. So again, I wish they would show the defensive stat here, because they're talking about his defensive versatility. But he'll be a perfect complement to Cade Cunningham in Detroit. So he does play shooting guard. So if Detroit decides to keep Marvin Bagley III, which I really hope they do, because, again, I did a video talking about Cade Cunningham and Marvin Bagley III, and it's my highest viewed video right now. But having Cade Cunningham at point guard, a decent shooting guard, and then Marvin Bagley, you could see the Pistons start to move up with sort of a trio there. So that will be really exciting if he does complement Cade Cunningham as well as they're saying right here. So Dyson Daniels, shooting guard, 25.5% from 3, so pretty low 3-point percentage for a shooting guard, not going to lie. But let's look at what CBS has to say. So Daniels has been flying up mock drafts, giving his size and defensive ability from the guard position. So again, talking about defense. He plays with a calmness and certainty beyond his years, and his playmaking is truly reveal itself with better teammates around him. At the very least, Indiana will get a big, stout defensive guard with a high IQ. If his shooting eventually comes around, you're looking at a Lonzo Ball type impact. Okay, so Lonzo Ball type. So again, good on defense and really good with assists. 4.4 assists per game despite not being a point guard. So okay, good comparison there, comparing him to Lonzo. I haven't seen many highlights of him, and I don't have his defensive stats in front of me again, but it would be exciting to see that. So. Shaedon Sharpe, this is one that's been talked about with the Spurs a little bit, so I've kept up with him a little bit. I think Sharpe makes sense for the Blazers for a couple of reasons. If they end up keeping the pick, he's the most intriguing prospect at this point in the draft to dangle as a potential trade sweetener for a win-now player or two. Secondly, if Portland eventually decides to part ways with Damian Lillard, that's not going to happen. Commence a full rebuild, Sharpe is exactly the type of young player you want to build around. So they're putting Sharpe with the Portland Trailblazers to start a rebuild in order to get rid of Damian Lillard. I don't think that's going to happen, so I don't think he's going to go to the Trailblazers. But the reason I say that is we talked about last episode, Portland got rid of a lot of players, and the reason they did that is to get cap space. And with that cap space, I know Zach LaVine recently did say that he does want to re-sign with Chicago now. But you also have DeAndre Ayton and some other players that you can potentially get to Portland, and I really think that's what Portland is trying to do. They don't want to rebuild with a bunch of young players. They're trying to get cap space to get some of these veterans so that they can go to a deep playoff run or something. Because right now nobody wants to play in Portland. But if you get some huge players like DeAndre Ayton or somebody to play alongside Damian Lillard, and all of a sudden you're in the conference finals, then that will start to pull some more players towards Portland rather than not being in the playoffs or being a first or second round exit every year. So, Jeremy with 3 elite scorers. The Pelicans don't need to focus on offense with this pick. Agreed. They have Brandon Ingram. They're going to get Zion back and everything. Is a unicorn defender legitimately capable of guarding 1 through 5? Okay, I need to watch some highlights of him then, because that will be very exciting to see. Offense is going to be an uphill grind, but he's reportedly shot the ball well in workouts. It might be hard to play them at the same time initially, but Alliant with Sokin and Herb Williams will leave opposing offensive carrying in the fetal position. All right, we're just going to do the top 10 picks no. We'll keep going because the Spurs have a few other picks, if I remember. So, all right, Keegan Murray. This may be a bit far for Murray to fall, but the concerns about his athleticism and defense are legitimate. That's not a good line to hear about my Spurs. San Antonio will gladly take him as his three-point shooting and overall skill should fit a void on a team with a lot of young guard talent. That is true. He is a power forward with a good 3-point percentage and 23 points per game. So that is good for the Spurs, but I wish his defense was a little bit better. But at the same time, we have DeJounte Murray, who was the steals leader, so that's good. But I wish that if we're getting a power forward like this, then he would have a better blocking and better defense. But, we'll take the 3-point percentage, yeah. Development staff, Murray could become an all-star level in a few years. So that's good to hear. So AJ Griffin, a sharpshooter with creation and playmaking upside. Griffin would fit nicely on a Wizards team that lacks his shooting from the wing. He could play the 4 and a 5, featuring Bradley Beal and Kristaps Porzingis. The problem is that Bradley Beal has been trying to be recruited by many other teams. So if you're getting him because he's a fit with Bradley Beal or Porzingis, that may not work out well because they might not be there in Washington for very long. So Jalen Duren, I'm honestly surprised Jalen has fallen this far. I really thought he would be further up, but let's see what they have to say. Okay, C loves a project, and Duren presents the best of both worlds. He'll immediately have the impact in the NBA as a shot blocker, lob threat, and rebounder. Again, so why is he not up higher? So, but he also has an intriguing side as a playmaker and eventually as a shooter. So it's easy to see why a team like Thunder would be enthralled. I'm gonna skip some of these because I don't really know them, so I won't have much to say on these guys. Ty Washington is somebody that I've watched because he originally was like towards the top of the draft. So the Hawks need a reliable backup point guard behind Trae Young for years now. They're fortunate if the Washington falls at number 16. He's an excellent off-ball shooter, and in the NBA he'll play more pick and roll, which is assessed as a scorer. So yeah, they're just basically wanting somebody on the bench behind the Hawks, and Ty, he's a great point guard. I've watched him a little bit, so I really think that he will fit this sort of need that they're saying for the Hawks to create somebody on the bench for Trae Young. So again, we're gonna skip some of these because I haven't really watched any of them. The Spurs, Dalen Terry, let's see what they say. So 36.4 3-point again. We already got somebody with 3-point with the pick that we had earlier in Keegan Murray. So hopefully some defense. They say something about defense here. A lot of heat around Terry's name as the draft approaches, as it's easy to see why. His 7'1" wingspan projects him as a potential lockdown defender on the wing. Let's go. But he also has scoring and playmaking upside on the other end. We didn't see much of it at Arizona because of his role, confident, blah, blah, blah. All right. I want to see more defensive big guys to the Spurs. Patrick Baldwin Jr. Nuggets have already found gold with one highly rated player. And why not take a gamble on another? Baldwin was one of the top recruits coming out of high school. The problem with Michael Porter Jr. is that he gets injured a lot. So you have to, if you're going to compare him to MPJ, you have to make sure that he actually plays, unlike MPJ. So was one of the top recruits coming out of high school, but his draft stocks plummeted after a horrific season at Milwaukee. If you look past the stats, you see a blah, 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 buckets getter. All right, cool. Jalen Hardy, Jalen Williams, Nikola Jovic. I've kept up with Nikola a little bit as well. The Spurs have, and he's going to the Spurs. I didn't even see the Spurs logo. I just saw the name. The Spurs have 3 first-round picks, so they can afford to take a big swing on Jovic, a legitimate prospect who goes well beyond having an extremely similar name to reigning 2-time MVP. Jovic is very rare, but the upside is obvious. At 6'10", he handles the ball like a guard in transition and has a deep 3-point range with a consistent quick release. So it doesn't say anything about his defense here, but he needs to work on getting his body ready, but San Antonio isn't in any rush. I wish that they would have, instead of saying, but San Antonio isn't in any rush, they would have put something like, but San Antonio can easily develop him. Because, again, San Antonio is one of the best defensive development staffs there is. So San Antonio is in kind of a rush because the fans are getting antsy for something to happen after our 5 championships, and now we're sort of standing at the 10th seed every year. But I mean, if he has a good 3-point, I'm hoping that we see some defense out of him again, and we'll see what happens. He'll probably end up going to the G League or something like that because our roster is full right now, but we'll see what happens. So, and alrighty, that is it for the draft. NBA also has its own mock draft, but I think it's relatively the same. Jabari, Chet, Pielo, Jaden, yeah, it's relatively the same. Spurs getting Jalen Duren instead of Keegan Murray being higher up. So, who do they have for our other picks? Let's see. Oh, they only have it up to 14. Okay, that's unfortunate, but alrighty. We will talk more about it, obviously, when the draft actually happens, but I am excited for all those picks that they have. I just gave my thoughts on them a little bit about how some picks could work and some picks can't. But that's all I got for this episode, guys. Once again, we'll talk more about it when the draft happens, and I hope I explained my thoughts on the championship enough. And we'll talk more about the playoffs next episode. I'll do a full breakdown of the playoffs because so far I've been doing it series by series, but now we can talk about the whole playoffs in depth next episode and all that good stuff. So I will go ahead and end it here. Again, look at these, listen to these episodes, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube, follow the Twitch, and I will see y'all in the next one, guys. Nathan but Net, episode 29.